Path of Exile is one of those rare games that is all at once really amazing and awesome, and at the same time really sucks hardcore. And where you fall along that spectrum is going to depend very much on your perspective and what kind of gamer you are, and a lot of different factors. I wanted to end my time with Path of Exile with kind of a retrospective slash, I don't want to call it a review because I haven't played enough of the game, and I want to make sure I have a very big disclaimer at the beginning of this video. I only have about 350 hours in the game, and if you know anything about this game, thousands of hours are required to become anywhere near competent and to be respected by anybody who is serious about the game. So this is a very casual perspective about the game, and this review slash retrospective slash whatever is meant for casual people who are thinking about the game, or people who have played the game before and just want another person's opinion on whether their perspective on it makes sense. Before we get too far in the video, I would like to ask you to help us reach that next subscriber milestone of 10,000 subscribers. That can only happen if you guys actually click the button, so be sure to do that. Like the video to spread it out to more people to give them a chance to subscribe. And we also have more than 1,500 other videos, various playlists that are nice and neatly organized for you to go and watch at your heart's content. So check out our channel and see what else you might like to watch. So anyways, I wanted to kind of split this video up into a couple of parts. First and foremost, I want to talk about Path of Exile in general. Just things that are specifically not related to the current league, because there's a lot of things that are going to transcend all of the leagues, and it's just these are topics that are going to apply to every part of Path of Exile, regardless of what league you're in. And then the second half of the video will be talking specifically about the current league, Settlers of Kalguur. So I wanted to make sure I split those up to make it easier for you. I have a video playing in the background that I may need to jump around in to keep visual content moving, so apologies if it gets kind of boring or if I had to take a second to move it around. I don't have stock footage. I don't have enough storage to stock all my footage and come up with some kind of video background that's seamless and everything, so I do everything on the fly. All right, so I wanted to start off with some pro and con list of just Path of Exile in general, from my perspective as a very casual player. So first and foremost, the world of Rayclast, or the world in general, and Rayclast as a continent is just a very interesting place to play the game. All of the towns have their own kind of ambiance to it, and every town is a little bit different. I would say that my favorite town is probably Sarn, because it has a really cool, interesting background song. The Trial of Ascendancy is there, and it's just a really kind of cool place to go. And then right after that, I think maybe Act 4. I forget the name of the town, but it's really dark and foreboding, and it's just kind of an interesting place to be. The monsters in the game are all very creatively imagined. They're very awesomely rendered and portrayed. The mechanics of the monsters are all, for the most part, very interesting and fun, and not at least during the campaign, it's not overbearing. And then, just the fact that in this game, you're fighting, the level of power that you rise to is just insane. You end up fighting gods and celestial beings and all kinds of other stuff. So it's a very interesting world. And you can easily immerse yourself into the lore if you want to take the time to sit down and kind of figure out what's going on with the story. Unfortunately, they don't necessarily present it in the most approachable way, and the best way to actually find out about lore about the game is outside the game, finding resources and stuff like that. So while the lore is amazing and interesting, if you want to take the time to go research it, you actually do have to go research it to find that information. I would say the second thing about the game that is amazing-ish, I'm going to put a qualifier on that, is that you can make infinitely customizable characters. You can start out, your class in this game more or less doesn't really matter because of this tree. Well, this is the Atlas tree, but there's a skill tree that is basically shared by all of the classes. So you could start out as a rogue, and then you can start moving towards the parts of the tree that are intended for the archer, or the wizard, or the witch, or the gladiator, the duelist, or whatever. You can move around the skill tree at will if you're willing to spend the points to move there. So you can kind of decide, I'm going to do an archetypical type of character, or I can try to customize my character in crazy ways to try to take to cherry pick the things I want from one class or another. Now, we're going to have to talk about that because there is a massive con that comes with that, and I'll cover that in the con section. So keep that in mind. That's why I said ish. There's a massive qualifier to that. But in theory, because of the way that they've designed the skill tree, you have infinite customization options to try to build the kind of character that you want to build. And as I said, the crazy upper power limit in this game is unlike most games that you've ever played. This game thinks nothing of going to fight against gods and super gods and things like that. If you look at the in-game content, like this guy I'm fighting right here, this is one of the entities that was trying to take control of the Atlas of Worlds, which is basically this multi-planar dimension that allows you to travel around and find different things. And this is one of the final boss fights in the game, as far as I'm aware. I know there's a whole list of things after this guy and the one you were just watching, but a bunch of different things going on there. So you get to walk around multiple planes, which are mostly just reimaginations of the same areas you went through the campaign, but it's still kind of cool to be able to go and do that. You basically get to have that Magic the Gathering Planeswalker experience, but in this kind of a format. It's kind of cool. The game is very fast-paced once you start getting into the end game. This character that you see right now, can run through a map very quickly, and things just kind of explode in his path. So once you get to the point where you have a character leveled up to the point where you want him to be, and you know what you're doing, you can clear maps very fast, you can clear bosses very fast, you can move through the content relatively quickly, assuming you've made your character built up in a way that actually works. And then the last pro I would say about the game in general, at least from a very casual perspective, somebody who doesn't have, deep knowledge in all of the little mechanics and stuff that have to do with the game, is that it's very addictive. It's one of those games where, especially in the first part of the game, when you're just learning and you're starting to learn new mechanics, you want to get to that next step. You really want to get to that next step, and you have this new thing that's just out of reach that you're trying to get towards. And if you're somebody like me and you're a progress bar kind of guy, you like watching progress bars move forward, and it makes you feel like you're getting a sense of accomplishment, watching progression towards something. It can become very addicting, and you want to hurry up and get on and find the next thing and make the next thing and accomplish the next map and all of that kind of stuff. So it can be a very addictive kind of game. Now, that said, I have a long list of cons as a casual player with this game. I don't want to say a long list, but my list of cons is a couple points longer than my list of pros. Because there's certain parts of this game that if you are a casual player, you're really going to struggle with having to deal with these things. First and foremost is just the extremely steep learning curve. There's just so much to learn in this game, especially after it's had 10 years to build on itself to become what it is now. Make sure we're having fighting going on in the background. It's had 10 years to build up on where it is today, and unfortunately, one of the big problems is that they continue to build from what they already have. I don't want to say unfortunately. It's not unfortunate that they do that, but it does make it so that the game is infinitely complex. Infinitely complex. You know what I mean? Every few months they have what's called a new league, and each league introduces a new mechanic to the game, and then assuming that people like that mechanic, they end up adding it to the base game, and then that gets rolled into subsequent leagues because it just kind of keeps building and building and building. But even if you just take that away, the skill tree itself, the nodes that you can go to around the tree, there's just so many of them, and there's so much that you have to learn about how the game works before you can even competently navigate around that tree, that if you're a casual person who doesn't want to have to sit down and do a bunch of research and watch a bunch of guides and do a bunch of different stuff, you're going to really struggle to play this game. Figuring out how gear works. I still don't really understand. After 350 hours, I still don't really understand how gear works in the game. Especially certain mechanics of gear, like evasion and, there's so many different stats that can be applied to the gear that you're wearing that it's very, very hard to figure out what the hell you're going to do. The gems that are available, skills in this game come from gems, different color gems, sort of like Final Fantasy, red, green, and blue. They're socketed into gear like they were in Final Fantasy. It's clear that the inspiration was drawn from that game. And if you don't know how your basic skill works, and then there's different gems that you can link to your primary gem to make it do different things. If you don't understand how any of that works, if you're not willing to sit down and do the research to figure out how that works, you're not going to know what you need to do. You're not going to know how to efficiently combine those things together. And it kind of leads into my next point, which is that we talked about how your character can be infinitely customizable, but realistically, that customization is an illusion. We are given the illusion of choice in this game because while you can allocate your points in a way that you want to do it, and you can take specific gems and link it to whatever you want to link it to and try to make the gem do what you want it to do, the reality is that the way with any system that has hard and fast rules and works in a certain way, some strategies are going to be effective and some strategies you're just going to die a lot. And this is one of those games where you have a limited number of options that are viable to play. You may be able to customize your character any way you want, but realistically, you need to make your character work in a certain way. So for example, if because they've made things like life, your health, how much health you have, because they've made those very most of that is dependent on either the gear that you're wearing or the nodes that you take in the tree. If you don't know what you're doing and you don't make sure you equip the right gear and you move to the right parts of the tree to make sure you're getting extra life, you're not going to have the health to continue playing the game. That's just the way that it works. Evasion. And like my biggest gripe is the fact that there doesn't appear to be a way for me to play my favorite kind of character, which is the dual-wielding evasion assassin. There just doesn't seem to be a way to make that work. And so we get this illusion of choice where it seems like there's infinite customization, but realistically, there's a limited number of options that are actually viable to progress any reasonable distance into the content, and that kind of sucks. If you look at it from an intellectual standpoint, it makes sense that that's the way it is, but one of the selling points is supposed to be infinite customization, but that's really not a thing. It's an illusion of choice, and it just kind of sucks that way. I think my biggest frustration in this entire game is movement impairing effects. I know it's a common theme in a lot of different games, but the movement impairing effects in this game are just incredibly punishing. And if you are not playing a character that has any kind of damage resistance at all, like physical damage resistance, you're going to struggle a lot. This character that you're seeing right now is a massively tanky character, and he can sit there and take a bunch of punishment, and he has a high amount of regen, and he's able to just weather that kind of stuff. And if he gets frozen, it's not that big of a deal as long as he doesn't sit there for too long. But if you're playing any kind of a squishy character and you get frozen or stunned or anything that makes you stand still for a couple of seconds, it's really easy to be just like taken out in half a second by 4 or 5 different shots that come your way, and you're just done. And I'm not even talking about bosses. I'm talking about just regular monsters, regular packs of monsters. You get unlucky and you get frozen, and then that's just insta death for you if you don't have your character set up to deal with that. And unless you hyper specialize your character into being able to deal with that, again, illusion of choice. You're just screwed. So I've always been of. I don't know that I've always been, but I agree with the philosophy that comes from many dungeon masters in Dungeons & Dragons that you should never do anything that takes control away from the character or control away from the player. If you're going to have some kind of an obstacle, it needs to be an obstacle that allows the player to overcome that themselves rather than, oh, I just got unlucky and movement impairing effect and I'm dead. That is something that should never, ever be in any kind of a game. Realism aside, it should just never be in a game. And I'm spending so much time on this because it really bothers me and it really frustrates me because a lot of times you can't get around it. You have to run through a pack of monsters that has this freeze ability. They freeze you, they kill you. You try again, and maybe you're not able to kill them, or maybe whatever reason it is that you have, it's just super frustrating to have control taken away from you. If I'm going to die, I want it to be because I made a mistake, not because I just got unlucky with a roll or I got unlucky that an effect hit me. That's just, I think that's bad design. And I seriously disagree with it, and a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me, but whatever. And then the last con I want to talk about, I'm sure there's more, but these are the ones that stand out mostly to me. It's just like every other game, the end of the game is just one big, massive grind. I think they handle the end game better than a lot of games with this Atlas of Worlds system that allows you to see a map of different things, a map of different places that you need to visit. It does make you feel like you're progressing, but you eventually do get to a point where now you're just grinding to get better and better gear. And as somebody who's just a casual player, that's just not something that appeals to me in the slightest. I am not the kind of person who chases numbers. I am not the kind of person who chases visual gear or anything like that. I want to play a game because it's fun to play. And at a certain point, once I'm just doing the same thing over and over again with no tangible benefit, I'm more or less done with the game at that point. So I don't know that there is a solution to this, but it is a con of just about every game that's like this. You get to a point where there's no more real progression to be had other than just trying to bump your numbers a little bit, and that's just not something that I'm particularly interested in doing. So that's my pro and con list for Path of Exile in general. Now I would like to move on to the Settlers of Kalguur League specifically. So the pros for that, first and foremost, I think it's kind of cool that they have this interesting new mechanic, the Town of King's March. That's, from what I understand, is supposed to kind of bridge the gap between PoE 1 and PoE 2, because I believe you start out in King's March in the next game. So I think that's kind of cool. The town building is relatively easy and provides you with some really real benefits. You get straight currency, especially if you're focusing on the farming mechanic, which is like the wheat and the corn and some of the other weird looking plants that they have that you can do. If you invest heavily into the mining part of all of that, you can get some really cool, rare, and unique items. Sometimes you can get some six socket and 6-link items if you're really lucky. You get runes for adding some enchantments to your items, which I never really delved into. It was just another long list of things that I really didn't want to have to sit down and research to figure out how the hell they worked. There's just a lot of different things that they added to the game. My favorite one was the farming part. It provides you with basically unlimited currency if you want to, as long as you can keep the gold running in, moving in to keep paying your farmers. You're constantly growing whatever it is you tell them to grow. You don't have to personally put anything into that other than just making sure that there's gold in the coffers to pay them to keep working. And in return, you get all different kinds of currencies, chaos orbs, and all different kinds of stuff that it comes back when you ship all the stuff out and get your stuff back. And it also kind of adds old mechanics that I don't have any personal experience with, because I only started in the last league, and I didn't even play the league mechanics for that one, so I don't really know. But my understanding is that things like the Recombinator and there's tattoos and some other things that are in the game now that they brought back in from other things. The Settlers of Kalguur League kind of moved all of that stuff and put it together, and I think that's kind of cool. It's one of the things about the game that is really is one of those positives about the game where you learn a mechanic and then it isn't wasted, because eventually it comes back and you kind of know how to do it again. So I do think that that's a pro. Now, moving into the cons for Settlers of Kalguur, I have to say that the town itself it's really boring. Like most games that are like this, there's no customization, really. You're able to upgrade the things that they've put there for you, but there's a set number of things that you can get. They're placed in a set position that you can't move, and there's no way to make that town feel like your own, like your hideouts. In the game itself, in the regular game, you have hideouts that you can acquire that, have different themes, and you can get specific items to move around and put everything where you want. You can invite NPCs to your hideout, and they can sit there, and you can talk to them and interact with them and trade with them and things like that. And you can make it, you can endlessly customize it to put them wherever it is that you want to put them. Whereas with the town is a town. The town is going to look like every other town, and you can't move anything around, and that's it. So I think one thing that they could do is to at least add some elements from your hideout, things that you can put in your hideout, to make it so that you can basically make the town kind of your hideout. allow you to put have a map device there that you can use, have different kinds of things to make it so that if you don't want to use your hideout anymore, you can just hang out in King's March, and that can be the place you hang out, and be able to invite all the NPCs there and all that kind of stuff. I think that would make the town itself much more interesting, because realistically there's nothing to do in the town outside of just the town stuff, and that's it. I see that as a fair bit of a negative, because basically you're just coming into King's March, you do a couple of tasks, and then you leave. You're not really hanging out there at all. I think there is, I don't think. There is definitely a serious potential to waste resources if you're not savvy about how you run your town. There's wages that happen in the game, and those wages are based off of people being hired, and there's a certain amount of wage that you pay per hour, and if you're not careful, especially if those people aren't doing anything, you could waste a lot of gold having people that are on the payroll not doing anything, and you're still spending money on them, but you're not getting anything out of the gold that you're spending on them. So it adds another layer of having to pay attention to things that, especially if you're already overwhelmed by the rest of the game, you're going to have a hard time remembering, oh yeah, I got to go back and make sure that they're still mining ore so that I'm not wasting the gold by having them on the payroll. I think it would be nice if they made it so that the gold was only spent if they were actually producing something. Like the farmers are fine because the farmers are always producing something. But for example, the miners and the smelters and all that stuff, they're getting paid whether they're smelting anything or not. And because you have to go out and find the ore for them to mine and for them to smelt, if you don't find anything and there's nothing for them to mine, you're paying them gold to be there, but they're not doing anything and you're not getting anything out of that. So you have a really serious potential to waste a lot of gold, especially if you're not able to find cheap labor to make that work. Speaking of ore, I think that's one of the things about it that really frustrates me, and it's one of the things that frustrates me a lot about the game in general. I forgot to mention it in the actual overall PoE part, but this game is highly based on RNG, and I hate gambling. I don't like putting in effort only to find out that effort was completely wasted. And the ore system in this game provides another layer of RNG on top of all the other RNG that you have to do in the game. If you don't find the right kind of ore, if you don't find enough of the right kind of ore to meet the demand that certain parts of the world are asking you for once you get to the shipping mechanic, it gets really frustrating because now you're not able to fill orders, and it would be much nicer if it was set up in a way that made it so that the miners just mine the same way that the farmers farm. You tell them what you want to mine, you pay them to go find the ore and mine the ore, and then you get money out of that. Again, this is a casual perspective, and I think I have a certain opinion on it that goes a certain way. So there's the RNG aspect of whether you find the ore first and foremost, whether there's enough in that ore to actually be worth fighting all the monsters for it. Whether you have enough of one kind of ore to actually, ship it to a place that needs that kind of ore, that kind of stuff. It's just really frustrating sometimes. And that's why I generally lean towards the farming aspect of it, because there's a lot less of you having to participate in that process. You just set them to farm something and they just keep generating that resource. And that's kind of the other part of it, is the shipping mechanic, right? Like, I'm not a fan of the shipping mechanic. They have two different options. You have a 30-minute option and then a 3+ hour option. And, if you're in the middle of trying to get things done, you don't want to have to stop every 30 minutes to go run back to King's March, figure out the shipment, because that highly depends on what kind of person you are. I'm a very hyper-focused, tunnel vision kind of person, and it's really what ends up happening to me is that the little notification pops up that says, oh, your ship arrived, and I'm like, oh, I need to go back and take care of that, and then my brain immediately forgets about that because I'm focused on what it is that I'm doing, and then an hour and a half later, it sparks in the back of my head, oh crap, that ship was delivered. No, they're not getting anything done. So you run back, you try to get that stuff done. It would be really nice if they had an option for maybe a third-party merchant who has his own ship, and you go to him and you sell your stuff to him, maybe at a discounted rate or something, so that you don't have to worry about the other parts of the shipping mechanic, which is that sometimes your ships can be commandeered, and maybe you lose part of your shipment, or your shipment gets commandeered by pirates, and you have to go fight their leader off, and just a bunch of different things that it would be nice to have the option to not have to do that, and maybe you just pay for that by getting a reduced rate because you're paying a commission to this guy rather than having to do it yourself. The shipping mechanic is kind of cool, I guess, but to be perfectly honest with you, I'd much rather have a much more straightforward and direct option for that. And realistically, that's kind of the big thing, is that it's just the Settlers of Kalguur mechanic is cool in and of itself, but it's a massive distraction from the game. It's a massive distraction from trying to get to actually, you know, leveling your character, progressing your character. It definitely provides you with some very real benefits, but it's just it splits your attention between trying to, you know, progress through maps or progress through the campaign or whatever it is that you're trying to do, and, you know, leveling up this town so that it actually provides you with what you need, and having to stop and do all of these different things over and over again. So realistically, like most games, if I wanted to play a town building game, I'd go play a town building game, and I'd rather have games that just focus on what they do rather than, you know, trying to add these different things from other games that don't really apply to what it is that you're doing. And the last thing I want to say about Settlers of Kalguur is, and I'm going to use some colorful language here, fuck that tornado mechanic. Oh my God, I cannot stand that they've added that in there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a massive tornado that will sometimes appear on the screen, and it'll be moving around. And with all the visual busyness that's going on, sometimes you don't even realize that it's there, because there's just all these flashing effects and all that stuff going on. And it does so much damage, and a lot of times it has a movement impairing effect. I can't stand that tornado. That's all I'll say about that. F that tornado. Oh my God, I can't stand it. Oh, okay. Anyways, all that said, I'm going to close this video out now with some final thoughts to kind of summarize my thoughts about the entire game as a thought. It's initially a very daunting game. There's so much information, and I haven't even chipped away at a percentage of what there is in the game for you to be able to go and do. So if you're looking for something that has a massive depth of content to do, this is definitely something you might want to consider. It definitely takes a while to get into it, though, because the massive amount of information is not something that you can just quickly pick up unless you're just some kind of a genius person who's able to just instantly absorb whatever it is that you're reading. You're going to have to do some research. You're going to have to spend some time figuring out what you want to get into and how you want to get into it. The first playthrough of the game is really amazing. Very few games have had the kind of experience that the first playthrough of this game, especially once you start fighting some of these higher level things that are just, you know, I'm actually fighting a god? What? It becomes very addicting. That's another good thing about the game if you're looking for something that you can sink a lot of time into. But it becomes extremely frustrating when you start to realize that some of the things that you want to be able to do just aren't feasible. See my example of the dual-wielding dagger assassin. That's the one character that I want to play in this game that there's just no feasible way to make it work. There's no guides out there that will help you get to that. There's no like I've looked around the tree trying to figure out ways to kind of make that work. Most of the time you need a shield, or most of the time you need to have a two-handed weapon, or most of the time you need something that just makes it to where dual-wielding two daggers and doing some kind of poison-related thing, or whatever it is that you're trying to get to, there's just no feasible way to make that work. There's plenty of content for newcomers, but the late game requires a grind mindset. And if you're not the kind of person who's interested in grind, this is going to be one of those games where you play it through the campaign one time, you finish most of the stuff, and then you walk away from it, and maybe you come back to it later because you want to try doing something different. I think the Settlers of Kalguur content is cool. It's cool, but at the same time, it requires a certain mindset, and it's a distraction from the game itself. And I don't know that I personally I got a couple of things leveled up, maxed up, and leveled up, and after that, I don't really have much use for the actual mechanic itself, other than the rewards that it can potentially give me. And I think there are other ways to make that work that don't require you to stop what you're doing every 30 minutes or an hour to go take care of whatever it is. And I don't know. I think their approach to the way they did it makes sense. I think that the mechanic itself is a good mechanic, but I don't know that I necessarily want to have to deal with it in the game. So that's a personal preference thing. So anyways, all of that said, hopefully this guide provides you with some kind of a sense of what the game is, what the Settlers of Kalguur mechanic is. There's plenty of other guides out there that are going to tell you how to do these things, but I just wanted to give kind of my own opinion on how all of this is. Some of the things that I like about this game, some of the things that I really don't like about the game. and just kind of summarize my time with Path of Exile, because I'm more or less done with it at this point. I'm moving on to other things. I'm not the kind of person who can obsess over a game for long periods of time, and I'm ready to move on to something else. So hopefully you found this retrospective somewhat entertaining and interesting. Hopefully it provides you with some value if you've either played the game or not played the game, whichever category that you fall into. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, so that the YouTube algorithm will spread it out to other people. Subscribe to the channel to help us reach that 10,000 subscriber mark. If you enjoy watching content on this channel, please consider joining as a member to get certain perks, such as early access to videos and other things. Or you can just leave YouTube's version of a tip with that thanks button. So again, thank you very much for watching. Hope you got something out of this video. Be sure to come back for the next one and go check out the 1,500 plus other videos we have on the channel. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.